Well, hi everyone. I'm John Ritland, and this is a countdown of 20 terrible WCW storylines. Because people love the WWE one so much, I figured I'd tackle Ted Turner's Wrestling World. And boy, it had some great highs. It had some incredible highs, actually. The whole 83 weeks thing, and them creating so many cool characters, having some great goddamn matches, a great talent roster, even with some of the job guys in there. They had a really good product for a number of years. But sweet Christ, even at their best, and even sometimes in some years that people remember fondly, they had some really shit storylines. And it was actually mind blowing to see that 20 isn't even going to scratch the surface. And obviously, it's going to be a two-parter, much like, the WWE one was. But good Lord, looking at this list, it's hard to believe that some of these storylines even actually happened. I also have ones lined up for Impact Wrestling and possibly a couple other companies we will see as time goes on. But I would love to know what you guys have to say in the comments. So without further ado, let's start off with number 20, the Flair heart attack around Starrcade 1998. Anybody remember Starrcade 1998, building up the whole Nash Goldberg thing? Flair and Bischoff and a few other people and all that, building up this whole thing where Flair was finally going to be able to take power from Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff was going to be ousted from controlling WCW and the whole, because the NWO had been gone. Don't worry, there's a little more on that in part two, the whole reformation of the NWO. Oh dear. But this thing of Flair finally wanting to get at Bischoff, it's all piggybacking off of when Flair finally came back in September of 1998, September 14th specifically, where it's one of the last times that Nitro beat a Raw in the ratings because they had Flair's much publicized return, and my God, what a pop that was. But this was a couple months later, and the biggest show for WCW, Starrcade going all the way back to 1983. You're thinking, okay, Flair's just going nuts. He's doing that promo where he's stripping down his clothes, saying, "You can have my clothes, you can have my watch, you can have my money," this kind of stuff and everything. And he's doing this, and then they obviously fake him having a heart attack, even though with as fired up as he did, it's amazing he didn't give himself something, because that's just how, fired up Flair was. But they did this whole thing where Flair was taken to the hospital, and it wouldn't be the last time Flair would be in a hospital. There's more on those storylines here in a little bit. But my God, watching this stuff where it's like, oh, they treated it like it was so serious, and it wasn't. It kind of reminded me of the whole Fritz Von Erich thing that they did in WCCW near the end of World Class's run before it became USWA. But this was in such bad taste, though, because yes, the Flair Bischoff storyline was rooted in realism, but it was so fucking stupid to make it, oh, he had a heart attack, he had a heart attack. No, you don't kind of do that. You just don't do that stuff. You don't do that stuff in general. You can base it off real life animosity, but this was just not good. And then you had Bischoff beat Flair through dubious methods, and then you had Flair finally beat Bischoff, and I believe that was the final Nitro of 1998 where he took power, and Bischoff was just back to being an announcer. But the whole build to it, just in the month of December, just left a bad taste in my mouth and just really wasn't all that good. So now we go to just a few months later. We go to the whole Piper Flair battle for WCW presidency thing. That's what we're going with. We're going with Flair, got drunk with power. He was, he declared himself president for life. He was trying to go for Flair's world title. Even managed to become world champion. And then you had, you had DDP win it at Spring Stampede 1999, and then they tossed the title around a whole bunch, but that's another story for another day. This was when Piper had come back, and Piper was, in the mix and everything, and him and Flair had a long history going all the way back to Jim Crockett Promotions, I believe even Georgia Championship Wrestling, where they kind of rooted some of that stuff in. But the whole point is Flair and Piper had this history going back into the early 80s, and then even had some matches in WWE, mainly on house shows and stuff, and a few televised specials. But with this, you had Flair drunk with power, and then you had Piper. First, he was, this good guy battling against Flair, and Flair would get locked away somewhere. Don't worry, more on that later. That I just didn't understand. But this one, the main reason I'm giving its whole entry rather, is because it was either, they couldn't make up their mind if Piper was either a good guy or aligned with Flair, and they kept doing this where it's like they would eventually turn Buff Bagwell babyface because they would have Buff Bagwell and Piper have a match, and then it's like, oh wait, we're not going to battle over the presidency, we're just going to be co-presidents for life. That's exactly where the end of this happened, and then power got given back to WCW to name a new president and everything, and the whole storyline was a goddamn mess, and two of the all-time greats were made to go out there and chatter and look like goddamn idiots because they probably had no clue what they were supposed to do, even as, you know, many years they had in wrestling. They were basically just given this idea of, hey, we're just going to write this story literally segment to segment and week to week, and if you forget about any of this stuff, well, too goddamn bad. Too goddamn bad if you forget about any of this, because we're going to forget about all of it, and we're just going to rip it up, and we're just going to fly by the seat of our pants, and it made no sense. It made none. It was totally fucking mind-blowing watching Piper and Flair try to salvage this terrible storyline. We then get to number 18, staying with Ric Flair, which would probably be a dangerous thing right now, you know, with all the social distancing. You got Ric Flair buried in the desert. Remember when they basically made Ric Flair a goddamn joke in 2000? And this whole feud with Vince Russo and stuff like that, and him feuding and then aligning with, and then feuding again with David Flair and stuff like that, and Ric Flair being buried in a desert. I don't know what the fuck else I need to say. He's buried in the goddamn desert. One of the greatest world champions ever was buried in the goddamn desert. So, I mean, what the actual shit? What the actual shit was this? This was fucking goddamn stupid. And it was Flair no wonder Flair had no goddamn confidence when he came to WWE. It was fucking bullshit. I mean, like, if you watch this stuff, I believe this took place in either August or September of 2000. I believe. My memory's a little fuzzy on some months when it comes to WCW 2000 because so much shitty stuff happened that there's a lot that I can't really get. That I can't really just pinpoint right down. I actually am watching all the WCW pay-per-views from 2000. I am going to be reviewing those. That's going to be a lot of fun because, oh boys, sold out Super Brawl and uncensored, it has just become a fountain of bullshit really, really quickly. But this, like, the idea is, how did they get out in the desert? Why were they in the desert? Why was Ric Flair buried out there? Why was this on a wrestling program? All right, Vince Russo and whoever the fuck else was in charge. Now, we get to number 17. Our partner is going to shock the world because he is the shock master. And then Fred Ottman, the former tugboat, former typhoon, tripped over a board. His stormtrooper glitterized helmet fell off. And I don't even know if glitterized is a word, but it is now. And his debut was pretty much shot to shit right there. This whole idea was that, you know, he was going to be a partner for Sting and the Bulldog, and I forget who, I think it was Dustin at Fall Brawl. And, yeah, if it wasn't Dustin, it was somebody else. It was like, but I remember it was Sid, it was Kane and Cole, who would later become Stevie Ray and Booker T. But the idea was always supposed to be this big, shocking reveal, and it was this big guy, pretty talented big guy, by the way, Fred Ottman. If you haven't seen Typhoon Earthquake, if you haven't, or Typhoon Tugboat, but he teamed up with Earthquake as a natural disaster. It's a pretty good big man, actually. Good guy or bad guy, he's actually pretty good. But this was just doomed. You hear Dusty Rhodes explain it. It was like, oh, it worked because he busted through the wall and oh, everything looked good, and then a board had to be put on the bottom of the wall to keep it up. And then he tripped over it, and then you even had the person voicing him over, Ole Anderson, that was cracking up. He was goddamn losing it, cracking up, because he just could not goddamn believe that this was happening. And you had to feel for Fred Ottman, you really, really did. The Shockmaster would have been, you know, ruined right from the beginning. Regardless of even if he hadn't tripped over, it had now become infamous and everything, and they've even, you know, they've developed memes and stuff like that, and it actually has kind of turned around to being kind of funny, and some people even have sympathy for the guy, but you do have to feel for a guy that was pretty talented, went there, and the idea was to dress him in a weird outfit and a glitterized stormtrooper helmet. So it is one of those ideas where you have to question why Dusty Rhodes exactly thought that this was a good idea. And I love Dusty. I miss Dusty every goddamn day. He was a creative genius, but this was not an example of that. This was pretty goddamn stupid. So, but oh, that's okay. He got the victory at Fall Brawl. and was gone from the company by the beginning of '94. No, seriously, after that August clash, Flair for gold, or Flair for the gold, he was gone. He was gone a few months later. Absolutely hilarious. Anyway, we then get to number 16, the Scott Hall drunk angle. However you feel about Scott Hall and the way he acts and everything on social media and otherwise, this wasn't cool. Yes, Scott Hall had his demons. Apparently, he's still battling them. Apparently, he's been clean for a while. Good for him. Very good for him. But this is during the height of them. It was like 98, 99, I believe. 99, they were still making him kind of drunk, but they were really making him drunk in 98, where he was even puking up on Bischoff. He had a lot of abuse issues. He had a lot of drunkenness, disorderly conduct. He had obvious alcohol issues, but obvious, just stuff that was really haunting him. He had his demons, and it got really, really bad, and it started to affect his performance. I mean, when he is an example, many have said when he was on, like he was one of the best, because Scott Hall was a great mind and a great worker in the ring, but this was something where if it had been handled with the right amount of care, and I'm not saying WWE wouldn't have done something just as bad, because they were doing plenty of tasteless bullshit, on their end, which I had covered in the 20 terrible WWE storylines, and got to keep these lists, by the way, because boy, I could end up turning this into like a 10-part series. I don't think it'll be 10 parts, but I could turn this into a series of stuff. With Scott Hall, though, they kept making it where like, oh, he's showing up to work drunk, he's showing us up, and now they're doing it with Adam Hangman Page on AEW, but they're handling it at least better. I mean, granted, it is some 20 plus years later, but Scott Hall would just do this, and then he'd act drunk, and then he'd have a feud with Kevin Nash in the Halloween Havoc '98, and Nash would just powerbomb him, beat him into oblivion, and then he would be off TV. Well, he'd be off TV for a little bit. Then I believe he would come back with the cattle prod and shock Goldberg. That was a good idea. That wasn't a good idea. That's actually not even on this list. The whole ending of Goldberg's streak, that is not on this list. That is how much, that's how many bad storylines they've had. But the Scott Hall drunk angle was just a bad idea. We then get to number 15. Fight for the letter T. It was between Booker T and Stevie Ray when they had separated as Harlem Heat. Stevie Ray was heel, said Booker's forgotten where he's come from, and I'm going to hire help. I'm going to hire this big guy. I don't even know the guy's goddamn name. I've watched 3 WCW 2000 pay-per-views, and they had this big black guy that he wasn't quite as big as Viscera or Mabel, but he was pretty big. And then you had the former Clarence Mason, and then you had the former Ahmed Johnson as Big T. Literally, because the guy had gained a ton of weight. Now, this is not even a fat-shaming thing at all. There's no reason to do that. He just got so massive that his athleticism was put by the wayside. He had gotten so out of shape that he couldn't do anything, and watching this, it was like Stevie Ray was like, okay, Booker, you forgot where you came from. I'm going to get these guys. We're going to take over the Harlem Heat name. We're going to become Harlem Heat 2000 because they were doing LOD 2000, which they did back in 98. So, once again, WCW being behind the times by this point. And then they were fighting over the letter T. Then he was Booker. He was suddenly Booker, not Booker T. And then he came out to the G.I. Bro theme, which was a gimmick that he had. And it was fucking stupid. It was just so fucking bad. It was a fight for the letter T. And then, the whole Harlem Heat 2000 thing ended up ending pretty quickly because they realized, oh crap, Ahmed can't even fucking work anymore. I don't know why he couldn't work. I mean, one could argue he never could, but at least he could get by on being a big guy that could move like that. And then eventually he was just a big guy that just couldn't move anymore. His knees were shot. He had health issues. I know he had kidney issues, and that's unfortunate. That doesn't even come with any kind of weight gain or loss. But he just couldn't do anything, and they dropped the storyline really quick. It's a really bad storyline. When it gets to number 14, Ray's Unmasked. Ray's Unmasking, that is. Ray's glorious unmasking when he fought Kevin Nash and had to remove his mask, and then he looked like a kid that you would just find playing out in the streets. Like, seriously, just playing out with his friends. Even though he was like in his 20s and stuff like that, and in his early 20s, he just looked so goddamn ridiculous. It removed his identity. They did the same thing with Hoovy, but Hoovy at least had some success after the mask got removed. Psychosis, same thing. You could get by with those. Psychosis had a cool mask. Hoovy did have a cool mask, but Hoovy did have some success after that. Same with Psychosis. watching Ray and have his identity stripped away. Now, he still had the ability. He was still able to go out and do some great things. Him and Kidman were an incredible tag team. Ray and Conan were a great goddamn tag team. But this was so fucking stupid because, one, it was done to remove every one of the luchadors' masks. And whoever came up with this, Bischoff, Nash, whoever the hell came up with this, it was a goddamn stupid idea. And it was just it was an embarrassment. It made Ray just one of the guys. No matter how good he was or anything, thankfully, Ray and WWE, agreed to bring him in with the mask. It was very iconic, led to a lot of merch sales, and Ray had his identity. He had his flow back. He was able to, how Ray got his flow back, that almost sounds like it should be a WWE Studios production. But when this happened, I mean, I remember the feud he had with Nash, and Nash tossed him around, which he should have, because even at that point, Nash, even in his diminished condition in '99, should have been able to beat Ray. If you look at the height difference and stuff like that, all that. But mask removal was a bad idea. And it really just shot to shit most of the cruiserweight division, who were still talented guys, but it's like, okay, well, hell, if we have a mask and it's our identity, we better not sign with WCW, or otherwise we're going to lose it. We then have number 13. We're going all the way back to 1988. Right around the time that Ted Turner bought the company, turning the Road Warriors heel. A little bit of a backstory. Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard had left Crockett Promotions September 10th, 1988. Philadelphia, I believe. I remember hearing that on Cornette's podcast, and I remember hearing about the show from other people like Arn and stuff like that, and Tully had talked about it in interviews. So they had left. Well, that left a hole for the Midnight Express to have a team to face. They had won the tag team championships, but now all of a sudden, oh wait, they don't have a really good heel team to face. They have some, but they still weren't quite turned face yet. So they feuded Fantastics for a bit until Dusty realized, oh wait, hey, hang on a second, the Road Warriors are really, really popular, a really popular team. But they're really burly. They can smack into people. They can beat up people. They can beat the shit out of people. Hell, let's turn them heel. Here's the problem. Nobody wanted to boo the fucking Road Warriors. And it really got, it got bogged down. It got bogged down quickly. It was bad. It was really bad. They beat the Midnight Express in, I want to say New Orleans. I think it was New Orleans. And it was right around the time that Crockett and Ted Turner had agreed to the sale. And then they were heels. They were, Road Warriors are heels, all this kind of stuff. They did the original Midnight Express thing. And then the Road Warriors were tag team champions. And then the whole thing is, okay, how do you beat the Road Warriors? How do you take tag titles off of them without having them really get beat straight up? Because that was their whole thing. They had to be invincible. And then Dusty Rhodes came up with the whole idea of, okay, hey, they got the shoulder spike. I'm going to have them stick the spike in my eye. Well, the visual of it. I mean, obviously, Dusty didn't have him do that and didn't bleed from the eye, but he did that, and that caused him to get taken out as the booker right there. So basically, the Road Warriors heel turn just cut a freaking, just cut right through a good portion of Jim Crockett Promotions, what would become, early WCW. And the Road Warriors had to be turned back almost immediately. I think by February they were back to being, good guys. February or March, and they had to be, because again, I mean, if they were they were bad people, they were bad guys when they first got in there, but then they had to be turned good, because how could you boo these guys? And that's really what it came down to. But the whole turning them heel just didn't work. It was a desperate move, and it showed, and it cost some people their jobs, and it affected a lot of characters. It was a rare misstep by Dusty. Then he would go on to wear the polka dots and get a run in WWE, but that whole turning the Road Warriors heel thing never really worked. We then get to number 12, the Fat Chick Thriller, Mike Awesome. Nothing wrong with who you love. I don't care if you love somebody that's 50 pounds or 500 pounds, whatever. That's not anything for me to judge. But WCW apparently thought that it was a good idea to make fun of heavyset people, including heavyset women, and had Mike Awesome, who was first the 70s guy. Well, he was the 70s guy, Fat Chick Thriller, all that stuff muddled in. Former ECW champion, a powerful guy in that organization in FMW Japan, pretty damn talented, 6'6", 6'7", 280 pounds, could dive like a goddamn cruiserweight. Watch his match with Spike Dudley at Guilty as Charged 2000. If you want to see a cool big man versus little man match. But instead of using this momentum of signing this guy who was ECW champion, then he would lose the championship, then he would go back and he would, or he would go back and lose it, then he would, be in WCW full time, wanted to get that guaranteed money. Instead of using this guy for his talents, now let's make him that 70s guy, the fat chick thriller. Easy for me to say. He'd have big women all around him, and he was a guy that loved big women. It didn't do anything for Mike. It didn't do anything for the women, the poor women that were there. It certainly didn't do anything for WCW's public image. Not that fat shaming has been something that wrestling hasn't done for years and years and years. But this didn't benefit anybody. It definitely didn't benefit Mike. And it definitely didn't benefit the fans because nobody really remembers this fondly. Shame, as Mike is pretty goddamn talented. Number 11, Ric Flair in a nursing home in, April or May of 99. Something like that. Remember that? Remember this fucking bullshit? Might even been June of 99. There's this weird period right after Spring Stampede of 99 that I have so many things meshed together. It's actually kind of funny. But Ric Flair was, he was, convinced he was still the president. No, he was actually in WCW, or he was actually in a WCW nursing home, but he was on a set. He was actually just with acting mental and everything with a bunch of other people that were acting mental. And even looking at it when I was 18, I'm like, this isn't entertaining. We're making fun of people that don't have anything to do with wrestling. We're taking one of the best world champions and making him a goddamn joke. And I don't understand why this shit is happening. It was just really, really fucking stupid. It was right in the glut of this whole, Piper Flair battle for, WCW presidency thing. So, now, I'm going to finish off with number 10, and then I'm going to do part 2 sometime later. We have number 10, the Alliance to End Hulkamania. After the whole Dungeon of Doom thing went by the wayside, and Hogan, got past that somehow, this was really just the culmination of it. Instead of having just the Dungeon of Doom, either Kamala the Shark, or you had Ming, Barbarian, you had Flair, Arn Anderson, you had a whole bunch of people that weren't even part of the Dungeon of Doom, but Flair and Kevin Sullivan had agreed to be part of, to align and everything because they wanted to kill Hulkamania. And they also had Z Gangster, who was, no, not The Gangsta, but no, the guy who was Zeus in No Holds Barred. They had him there. The guy who would also be the president in The Fifth Element. No, really. Go and watch that movie. It's kind of funny. But they also had a character that was this big muscle-bound guy, bodybuilder, called the Final Solution. No, really. Then the Ultimate Solution. Look, just call him the Solution. Just call him that. He's the solution. He's the solution to all the problems. But boy, I can't imagine why those names didn't really stick all that well, but they had built this up and everything where Hogan had been feuding with Flair. He'd been feuding with Kevin Sullivan for months. But they kind of put, the whole thing with the Yeti, and don't worry, I'm going to talk about that in great detail, to the side. And they just focused it on Kevin Sullivan, Ric Flair, and everybody's cronies. And also Lex Luger was there, and Lex Luger would end up turning on everybody. The team that is, the heel team he was with, and he would end up hitting Ric Flair, I believe, and causing the victory for Hogan and Savage. It was a 2-on-9, 3-tiered cage match, and it was one of the worst things that I've ever goddamn seen in wrestling. It was so fucking terrible. It was fucking atrocious. Like, why in the world was this seen as something that was going to be entertaining? It wasn't entertaining. And again, the Final Solution. No, really. Yeah, I don't know what you really want to say there. It was some of the worst television that WCW put on. This is one of the worst pay-per-views they put on, which is a funny thing considering what would happen later in 96, the whole NWO thing, at Bash at the Beach 96, but it's just ridiculous. So that's where I'm going to leave that off, because I'm going to get a lot more vicious in the remaining 9, and I think you guys can probably guess where some of these are going to be. But anyway, agree, disagree with what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.